Hi everyone, today I wanted to do a quick video on how to play slides, specifically the very basic techniques. And this is just because over the years I've run into a lot of people who, for one reason or another, they picked up a slide or they try to improvise with something and they couldn't make it work. So that's usually for one of two reasons, and the most common one is they couldn't figure out how to hold it on the guitar, how to make your notes sound good, and how not to end up creating a clicking sound. And sometimes it's for the reason that you can't figure out necessarily what notes to play or what riffs sound good. That one I'm going to have to cover in some other videos. But today I'd like to cover just the basic slide technique. So first I'll cover selection. Slide selection is kind of big, and there's a whole world of slides out there, and even if you don't want to go spend money on one, although I kind of recommend you do at least get one store-bought one to get you started. In a previous video though on this channel you can see me playing with a big lighter, so you can improvise with things. I've seen it done with sockets, hunting knives. In fact, there's a rumor supposedly historically that the very first slide may have been a hunting knife, although that just comes down to legend. So first off, what I recommend is a light material. You can play with things like sockets and all kinds of other things, but when you're new to it and if you want to have easier control over the slide, I'd recommend a lighter material, just because you're less likely to bang it into the frets, that sort of thing. You got more control. And then as you get used to it, you could experiment with all kinds of things. It's just for the sake of creating good notes and not beating up your guitar. One thing a lot of people start off with are glass slides. This is a Dunlop USA Model 203. Glass sounds pretty nice. It's got such a nice light weight to it. I even play it on my ukulele. So you can play slide on the ukulele, but you want to go with a nice light slide, obviously, because it's nylon strings. The only downside I can think of to glass is, well, breaking it. If you drop the slide, you're probably going to be sweeping up a mess and needing a new slide. The reason for having many different slides, there's a couple different reasons, other than they're just fun to collect. Different sounds, different materials give you different sounds on different guitars. So for acoustics, some people will like glass or steel on electric, or even vice versa. It comes down to your own personal taste. And considering a lot, they don't really tend to usually cost that much. Here in Canada, you could get a good slide for somewhere between 20, 30 bucks. It's not that hard to end up with a few of them. And then of course there's the option of, depending on how handy you are, and there's a few different ways of making these, but this is the top off of a wine bottle. I filed that one off, but if you had somebody or material or method of, cutting it, the only thing is that you want to make sure that you sand it down really good, that way you don't end up cutting yourself. The next thing I would mention is you want to decide which finger you want to have your slide on. Generally speaking, you put them on these three. You can do it on that one, on your index finger, but I like to use that for another purpose, which I'll get into. So I have slides that I can put on my pinky, ring, and depending on what I'm doing, I even have them for the middle finger. That's if I'm doing power chords. And I want the pinky and ring finger free. So another good option would be aluminum. If you don't want to go with a glass slide, this would be, I believe, a Fender aluminum slide. Sounds pretty good on acoustic guitar strings and not bad on electric either. So Fender aluminum would be some option, and once you get looking at things like Dunlop, those companies, those give you plenty of options. Then you can get the somewhat unique stuff from companies like CB Giddy or Stubby Slide, which is sold through Shane Spiel. But I'll do some more videos on other slides and sounds and things like that perhaps in the future. Now, when you're in a store or if you're making one and you want to try one on, and that's probably, depending on the store you're in, they may let you do that or even encourage you to do that. Some tips that I want to show you or tell you about: try it on slowly. It doesn't matter what you think your finger size is, try it on slowly. It's important because if you start to feel like it's getting a little stuck, you want to be able to stop rather than jamming it in, because then you got your finger stuck in a slide and you're in a music store. The other thing is, if you get one that's a little on the small side, say if you're somebody who's getting into blues or rock music and you're still growing, maybe you're a teenager and you pick up your slide, and then as things get going and your fingers get a little big for whatever reason, muscle or various reasons, or things are a little sweaty when you're playing a show, just keep in mind that you might want a little room to expand. Or you might end up in the situation where some night you're asking a couple of bartenders and a waitress to help you get a slide off your finger. And I can't think of why that example comes to my mind, but just be careful. You want to make sure that the slide's not too tight, gives a little bit of wiggle room. You don't want it too loose, but it should be able to come off your finger nice and easy. Not too easy that'll fall off really easily, but want to be able to pull it off. So, that being said, go crazy. There's a whole world of slide materials out there. Nice light one to start with. There is some people out there who will tell you that it should be alternate tuning. I was told years ago that it should be alternate tuning. No, you can play it in standard tuning. Alternate tuning is fun though. It gives you plenty of different options, but until you get into that, it's not that hard to do. You can play, for some songs specifically, standard tuning. And all I'm doing here is I'm going from a G chord and adding a B flat fill. I won't go too much into theory in this video, but what I'll get you to do is, if you want to start off doing chords with your slide, we can go D, G, and B. And basically we're going to play those three strings. So you want to miss your A and E and the E on this end. You're going to play those three middle strings. And what that does is it gives you a nice open G chord. So then if you think about the musical alphabet, as you move up the next frets, that just gives you new chords. So in the case of, depending on how, we won't go into it now, but I'll call it for today because of blues scales, the third fret, for instance, would be a B flat chord. Fifth fret would be a C, etc., etc. Moves on up and down the neck. At the 12th fret, you're going to have another G. Now, there's a trick to this. You don't want to be pressing down with the slide. So what stops a lot of people is, like, when you're pressing down to make chords, you're pressing down with your fingers, always I should say, and how you're making those notes is that you're shortening the string on the fret wire. So it doesn't matter where you have your finger in here, unless something's wrong with the guitar, you make the same note. That's not the case though with slide, because when you're just touching the slide to the string, you're basically imitating a fret wire, but you can move it up and down the neck. So the note changes wherever you move your finger. So if you want to have a nice clear B flat, you need to hold it right over the fret where you'd make that note. So there. And you want to aim it so that your finger and the slide is making contact with the strings right over that fret. If you go too far one way, it's not quite a B flat. It ends up being sharp or flat depending on which side you go. So if you want it nice and clear, you can do that. If you want to make sure that you are in fact making the notes that you want, if you're playing a single string, for instance, you could try putting a tuner on your guitar or turning the one that might be built in, depending on what you have, and you can check to see if you're making that note. So when you place your slide down on the guitar strings, you want to make sure you're not pressing down the strings, so you don't have to. You want to actually be able to see a bit of daylight between the strings and the fret. try and show you what that looks like, but that may not be easy to do. Yeah, my hand's in the way. Yeah, I can see a little bit there. So basically you're not pressing down, you're just touching it to the strings. The other thing is, and I mentioned this before, I will play slide for various different songs, different reasons, on different fingers, but I keep my index finger free just so that I can kind of mute the strings behind it. So here's the slide. My finger is touching, not pressing down, just muting. So like a mute. I'm not fretting the strings, right? I'm just muting it. And that way there's no strings vibrating open notes behind my slide. So I'll demonstrate that. For the most part, you can hear the note that I'm looking for, but you can hear a little bit of extra. So to take that extra out, I'm muting with my finger. So then I'm taking my slide and my index finger, and I can slide all the way up and down the neck. And I move from one fret to the next, never really hovering in the middle, but aiming for the frets. So as I mentioned before, this would be an open G chord. This would be a G sharp or an A flat, A sharp or B flat, etc. And if you want to do a fun blues riff in the key of G, now sometimes I'm lifting basically depending on what chord I'm on. So I like to do a lot of, depending on the song, going back and forth between the G chord. Those are some examples. So if there's some songs, if you're looking at buying a slide because there's some songs that you want to try, and you get it home and you're messing around with it and you're getting that clicking noise, and I don't really like to do it on purpose too much, but there's a click that if you're pressing down the slide on the strings, you hear that. You want to avoid that if possible. You can do it. Acoustics are nice to start with just because usually your action's a little higher. That's the distance, for those who may not know, that's the distance between the strings and the frets. The lower the action, the more likely you are to have contact with the neck. Now, the reason why I mentioned before the lighter material is you can do it, or it's easier to avoid having that contact. So you're less likely to have that extra weight of the slide. The more you get used to the control, though, you can use whatever you want. You can use a socket if you want. But it's good to have that option of lighter material so that you can get used to it. You can play with the lower actions. In fact, I probably started maybe on an acoustic guitar, but I definitely like to play on electric guitars too. You can raise the actions a little bit if you tend to play a lot of slide on your electric guitar, or have someone do that for you. But I don't always. Basically, it just comes down to getting used to the control. So, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment down below if you have any questions. And if you haven't already, you can check out my solo work. Just type in Sam Wenzel Music for YouTube. You'll get this channel, but you'll also get my solo material. You can also check out my band Weather Advisory.